All right, Cowboys Nation. Let's dive into this defensive coordinator search because it is starting to feel like we are finally watching the Cowboys do something different. You can almost feel the energy shifting. Like the front office is not just going through the motions anymore. We are hearing that there is a third in-person interview happening today. And even though the details are still a little messy, the noise around it is loud enough that you have to take it seriously. The key thing to remember is that the Cowboys are going to have a new defensive coordinator soon. I am talking within a week. Or at least within a week we should know who the pick is. Even if the paperwork is not officially done yet, that's how close this feels. And it is a rare moment where the process actually seems like it's moving at a real pace. Now, the confusing part is the timeline around these interviews. Especially when it comes to Jim Leonard, there is conflicting information floating around. And it is worth trying to connect the dots in the most logical way possible. The common understanding has been that NFL rules prevent teams from doing in-person interviews with coaches who are still active in the AFC or NFC championship games. The idea is that those coaches need to focus on the game, and teams have to wait until after the championship to meet them in person. That is the conventional wisdom, and it is what most people have been operating under. But then there was a report from the Dallas Morning News that threw a wrench into that narrative, saying that the NFL has a different timeline. According to the report, teams can talk to coordinator candidates up until Saturday, but they cannot do it before Denver is limited if they are involved in the AFC Championship prep. That is a lot of detail, and the takeaway is that the rules might be more flexible than we thought. If that is true, then it raises a lot of questions about why Jim Leonard has not been interviewed yet, especially if the Cowboys are genuinely interested in him. So why has Leonard not had an interview yet if the Cowboys really are interested, and he is still in the running? Why was there not an in-person meeting earlier this week? Normally, when a coach is being considered for a job, those interviews get reported publicly, unless it is something done privately. But even so, you would expect to hear something, and yet, there has been no sign of any interview with Leonard this week. Meanwhile, multiple Cowboys reporters and national voices are saying the Cowboys still have interest. That is not a coincidence when you hear the same thing from several credible sources. It is worth paying attention to. The logical explanation is that there are really the paths. Either the reports are wrong and the Cowboys and Leonard are not actually aligned, or Leonard simply chose not to do the interview this week. And honestly, the second option makes a lot of sense. Leonard has the AFC Championship game to prepare for. And if you are trying to get a job as a defensive coordinator, you do not want to be juggling to massive responsibilities at once. Flying to Dallas for an interview during a week of intense playoff prep does not sound like a smart move. It is far more reasonable to wait until after the game, when he can fully focus on the interview process. That would explain why we have not seen anything reported yet. But the bigger picture is that the Cowboys are doing this search differently than they ever have before. They are going through multiple rounds of interviews, both virtual and in person, and they are covering more ground than they have in the past. This is the kind of process you would expect from a team that is serious about finding the right coordinator, not just the easiest option. So if they decide to wait on Leonard because they want to make sure they are thorough, I am fine with that. The Cowboys are ahead of the curve compared to most other teams. Most teams looking for defensive coordinators have not even started their searches yet. The Cowboys are already deep into it, and that alone should tell you they are taking this seriously. Now, the key question is whether the Cowboys will do that second in-person interview with Jim Leonard, or whether they will simply choose one of the three candidates they have already met with in person. I am going to trust the process here. The Cowboys have been methodical, and they have clearly done their homework. They have already met with multiple candidates, and they have given themselves options. If they feel one of those candidates is the right fit, they should not drag the process out. But if they want to wait and make sure they have covered all bases, especially with Leonard still in play, that is a smart move too. The truth is, we are in uncharted territory here. The Cowboys have never handled a coaching search this way before, and it is a refreshing change. Let us shift gears and talk about the three in-person candidates who have already been in the building. These are the guys who have already made it to the next stage, and they each bring something different to the table. First up is Jonathan Gannon, who had his interview earlier this week. He is the former defensive coordinator for the Eagles and was head coach of the Cardinals for 3 seasons now. Gannon is not just on the Cowboys' radar, he has been connected to multiple teams, including the Commanders and the Packers. That tells you something. He is not a one-team option. There are other teams that see value in what he can bring. So what should we expect from Gannon's defense? The biggest thing is that it is zone-heavy, but it is not the exact same zone scheme you saw under Matt Eberflus in Indianapolis. There are more disguised coverages, more complexity, and a different approach to how he uses his personnel. One of the notable differences is how often his teams rotate coverages. The Cowboys, for example, were below 25% in rotating between cover 2 and cover 3 last season, while Arizona was well above 35%, which is near the top 10 in the league. That is a big contrast in philosophy. Another part of Gannon's style is that he does not blitz a ton. The Cardinals actually blitzed less in the most recent season than they did in the year before. When they did bring pressure, it was more creative, not the kind of obvious blitz packages that are easy for offenses to anticipate. They also use 5-man fronts frequently, and they experimented with 3 safety looks, especially when they were dealing with injuries and trying to adjust on the fly. There are even elements that remind you of Brian Flores-style pressure concepts. The issue, though, is that the results were not there in Arizona in 2022. The defense was solid when the talent was stacked, but once the injuries piled up, the unit struggled. That is the part that makes people hesitant. I will say this, Gannon is not a terrible candidate. He is an upgrade over Matt Eberflus, and he is not the worst defensive coordinator in the world. But he is not the most exciting option either. If the Cowboys hire him, I would not be upset. I would be satisfied, but I would not be thrilled. He is a safe pick, and sometimes safe is what you need. But the Cowboys have been looking for something more than safe this time. They want a coordinator who can bring a new identity and get the defense playing at a higher level. Next up is Donnie Jones, the Vikings defensive passing game coordinator. He interviewed with the Cowboys last weekend, and he is another name that has been generating a lot of interest. He has already had interviews with several teams, including the Giants, Packers, and Jets. That is a strong sign that he is on the radar of multiple organizations and not just the Cowboys. Jones has a long history in coaching, and his experience includes time in college and the NFL, working with defensive backs and in different defensive roles. The reason Jones is appealing is his time in Minnesota, where he has been part of a defense that has consistently played well. His influences are notable too. He has connections to coaches like Dave Aranda, Vance Joseph, Matt Burke, Terrell Austin, Marvin Lewis, and Brian Flores. That last one is a big deal. Brian Flores is known for building tough, disciplined defenses, and the fact that Jones has that kind of influence in his background makes him an intriguing candidate. He has been praised for his communication skills, which is something the Cowboys desperately need after the struggles under Eberflus. A coordinator has to be able to clearly communicate the plan and get the players to execute it. That is not something you can overlook. Now, the third in-person candidate is Christian Parker, the Eagles passing game coordinator. He is set to interview today, and he is a name that has risen quickly in the coaching ranks. Parker's background includes time with the Broncos, the Packers, and college programs like Notre Dame and Texas A&M. He has also been connected to some of the most respected defensive minds in football, including Vic Fangio. That Fangio influence is a major reason why he is gaining attention. The Cowboys have not hired a coordinator this young in a long time, and Parker, at 34 years old, represents a different kind of hire. He is a fresh voice, and that could be exactly what the Cowboys need. Parker's rise is interesting because it shows how quickly a coach can climb the ranks when he has the right connections and the right success. The Packers and Cowboys have already requested interviews with him, and as more defensive coordinator jobs open up, you can expect more teams to show interest. The big question is how the interview goes. If Parker can show that he has the confidence, the communication skills, and the vision to run a defense at the highest level, he could be the one who surprises everyone. So, where does that leave us? The Cowboys are in a position where they have a lot of options, and that is a good thing. They are not rushing this decision, and they are not settling for the first name that pops up. They are doing a thorough search, and they are taking the time to get it right. The only downside is that we are all left waiting, but that is part of the process. The key is that the Cowboys are finally acting like a team that is trying to build something long-term on defense, and that is the most important thing. The thing that really stands out about this Cowboys defensive coordinator search is how different it feels from what we have seen in the past and previous years. The Cowboys often seem to move quickly, almost like they were trying to check a box rather than find the right fit this time around. It feels like they are genuinely searching. They are talking to multiple candidates, doing multiple rounds of interviews, and not rushing to a decision just because the calendar says it is time. That kind of patience is not something Cowboys fans are used to, but it is exactly what this defense needs. If they are going to fix what has been a glaring weakness for years, they have to be deliberate, and that means taking the time to find someone who can truly change the culture. And that is why the Jim Leonard situation is so interesting, if he is still in the mix. It tells you the Cowboys are willing to wait for the right person, even if it means going through a longer process. Leonard has a strong reputation, and he has proven himself as a defensive mind in the league. The question is whether the Cowboys believe he is the right fit for this team and this roster. If they do, they might be willing to wait a little longer to get him. If they do not, then we will likely see the Cowboys pull the trigger on one of the 3 in-person candidates they have already met with. Either way, it is clear they are not afraid to be patient, and that patience could be the difference between another mediocre defense and something truly competitive. Now, let us talk about the bigger picture of what the Cowboys need in a defensive coordinator. The defense has been a problem for a while, and it is not just about schemes. It is about accountability, communication, and execution. You can have the best scheme in the world, but if the players do not understand it, or if the coaching staff cannot communicate it clearly, it will not work. That has been one of the biggest issues with the Cowboys' defense in recent years. They have talent, but they have not been able to consistently get the best out of it. The coordinator needs to be a teacher, a leader, and a strategist all in one. They need to be able to simplify things when necessary, but also bring enough complexity to keep offenses guessing. The Cowboys also need someone who can adjust in game. That is a huge part of being a successful defensive coordinator. The NFL is a chess match, and if you cannot adjust to what the offense is doing, you are going to get exposed. We saw that too often with the Cowboys. They would get beaten by the same looks over and over again because they were not making the necessary changes. The next coordinator has to be able to identify what the offense is doing and respond quickly. That requires preparation, communication, and a willingness to adapt. It is not enough to have a good plan on paper. You have to be able to execute it on the field, and you have to be willing to pivot when things are not working. Before we roll on, subscribe to Cowboys Wire News, drop a like, and turn on the bell. Your support keeps the Dallas Cowboys updates coming. Tell us what you think in the comments. A quiet ripple turned into a loud buzz across the league after Patrick Mahomes offered a reaction that nobody quite expected, in a casual moment that quickly took on a life of its own. The superstar quarterback spoke about the Cowboys with a tone that felt less like routine respect and more like genuine fascination. What caught people off guard was not just the praise, but the implication behind it. Around the league, whispers began almost instantly. Was Mahomes merely complimenting a historic franchise, or was he hinting at something deeper? According to those close to the situation, Mahomes' words carried an unusual warmth. He reportedly spoke about the Cowboys' culture, the brand, and the pressure of playing for a team that lives under a constant spotlight. For a player who already thrives on the biggest stages, the idea of embracing that spotlight seemed to excite him. The most surprising part came when he hinted, half seriously, half smiling, that wearing that star on his helmet would be a dream scenario if circumstances ever aligned. That single comment was enough to ignite speculation. Executives, fans, and former players began dissecting every syllable, wondering if this was just off-season talk or the first crack in what has long seemed like an unbreakable bond with his current team. No one is suggesting an imminent move, but the notion of Mahomes even entertaining the idea of playing in Dallas was enough to shake assumptions across the NFL landscape. In private conversations, some insiders suggest Mahomes admires how the Cowboys balance tradition with modern ambition. Others believe he was simply expressing competitive curiosity, the kind that drives elite athletes to imagine themselves conquering every possible challenge. Still, rumors rarely grow this loud without a spark, and his comments provided exactly that. For now, it remains speculation fueled by surprise and imagination. Yet the idea of Patrick Mahomes and Cowboys colors has already embedded itself in the collective mind of football fans, whether it was playful honesty or a glimpse into a future fantasy. One thing is clear, his reaction has ensured this rumor will linger far longer than anyone expected. That's a wrap from Cowboys Wire News. For breaking Cowboys updates, subscribe, drop a like, and turn on the bell. Tell us your take in the comments.